a lot of people cast Trump as this enemy of the deep state, this fighter against the deep state. And yet he tried to stage this coup with Juan Guaido, who you mentioned 81% of Venezuelans had never heard of, install him as president. Um, can you explain what went down there and why it wasn't successful?
Yeah, as I say in the book, yes, Trump got elected for taking an anti-interventionist line and speaking out against U.S. Disastrous regime change policy that had occurred in the past. And unfortunately, Latin America was a major blind spot for him once he came into the White House. And that, I feel, is simply because of geography and the outsized influence that the reactionary Venezuelan and Cuban lobby in Miami play in US politics. It's similar to the Israeli lobby, not as powerful and not anywhere near as powerful, but in many ways an extension. And this group has power in Florida. They have electoral power and they have power in our government. And so they're an actual base that Trump needs to play to politically, regardless of his own views. And he definitely outsourced his Latin America policy to hawks when it came to Latin America. I mean, John Bolton writes about in his own memoir, and a lot of my book was based on synthesizing my own experience and reporting with what I read in the memoirs of John Bolton and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo or Defense Secretary Mark Esper. And Bolton writes about how he selected Mauricio Claver Carron, who is a super fanatical Cuban American, who and Bolton tapped him to serve as his under national security advisor for the Western Hemisphere. And the two of them really, through their connections in the opposition lobby or the opposition Venezuelan lobby, crafted this proposal to recognize Guaido as president of Venezuela. And Bolton writes that Trump didn't initially want to put his name on the U.S. government document that recognized Guaido. And that the only reason Trump ultimately agreed to do that was because Mike Pence, the vice president, held a phone conversation with Guaido the night before his self-directed swearing-in ceremony and was really reassured in Guaido's capabilities and that he convinced the president to take this decision. And Bolton writes again in his memoir that he was present for that phone call between Pence and Guaido. So Bolton is nudging this along the whole way, this boneheaded policy. And eventually, as I write in the book, Trump became frustrated with he was told that you recognize this guy and Venezuela falls and changes overnight. And when that didn't happen, and the longer it went on, became clear that Maduro was actually very much in control of the country, Trump actually would ask his team why he couldn't meet Maduro and try to solve U.S.-Venezuela problems between our two countries directly with the government. And that Bolton writes proudly about preventing that. And Pompeo also ideologically working to prevent that. And of course, that's not an excuse. Trump, I choose to view him as a complex figure that is up against many moving parts of the administration and the government that I don't even think I have a full grasp of how it really operates. All I know is that the president is not truly the commander-in-chief or the chief diplomat of the United States. There's a permanent state that directs policy. And when it comes to Latin America and to Venezuela specifically, it was clear that there was a bipartisan agenda to drive out Maduro's government. And ultimately, the greatest irony is that Trump's extremist policy and Bolton's, Elliott Abrams, their existence and this coup attempt that they led was the greatest gift the United States could have ever handed Maduro's government. It made Maduro's government stronger than ever, and it crushed the opposition inside Venezuela because this radical opposition no longer could go out into the streets and cause chaos and try to overthrow the government by force, because they were up against this false narrative that their guy was already president. And even though he wasn't, if they were to go out in the street and have these big protests against Maduro, well, then they kind of look like idiots because they're saying President Guaido, President Guaido. So it killed that radical U.S. opposition and their strategy domestically. It made Maduro's government again stronger than ever. Really, it showed that, oh, we're not just lying when we say we're under attack from the United States. Now they've openly declared this coup policy, and it's naked. So it's time to double down and really, defend your sovereignty as a Venezuelan, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of Maduro. And so that it had the effect of that. And then it also ultimately led to the corporate coup aspect, which was regardless of what happened on the ground in Venezuela, the U.S. and its allies, the transatlantic financial behemoth of the West, was able to loot billions of dollars worth of Venezuelan wealth, whether in the form of gold bullion that's currently still sitting in the Bank of England, where even though the Venezuelan government has asked to repatriate that gold, they've denied it for years because of this coup policy, or in the United States, where as a result of the recognition of Guaido, U.S. institutions went ahead and seized Venezuelan bank accounts or oil pipelines even belonging to Citgo Petroleum, and courts have become involved in really taking apart these accounts and assets that belong to the Venezuelan government, and now distributing them among a handful of vultures that have been lurking in the corners. So the policy itself didn't succeed on the ground, and there's an irony to it because it backfired in a major way, but it did succeed in another realm, which is a realm that we often don't really see or talk about because finance is obscure and shadowy.
So that's interesting. I mean, going back to what you said about Trump there, that he was asking why he couldn't meet with Maduro and Bolton had to kind of twist his arm because, it comes up a lot in our space, this question of what threat, if any, does Trump actually pose to the deep state, right, broadly speaking? Because they certainly talk about him as if he's a threat to them. Like, they certainly don't want him around. That seems obvious. Yet, on the other hand, you can point to an example like this where he comes off looking like a big fake. But I guess what you're kind of saying is that it's more nuanced than that. Is their problem with Trump that he's high maintenance? That's what it sounds like you're saying. Like, basically, yeah, like they have to hold his hand through episodes like this. They can't count on him to do what they want without their guidance. And so he's a big pain in the ass.
I think in this case, he was led in a bad direction. And then once you make the decision to recognize Guaido, it's kind of, then you had to double down and more extremely on that policy because it was such a big risk to take that and now as the U.S. has failed, it looks ridiculous. So I think it was probably one of the worst foreign policy blunders of his presidency, along with killing Qasem Soleimani, I would say. And I do think, just from my experience covering Trump and his attempts at detente, to have warm relations with Russia or North Korea, I think especially Russia was such a red line that he was crossing and attempting there, that there was little room for progress on other fronts. And that's unfortunate because something that I'm trying to bring out in this book is for Americans to understand that we can't separate these countries. Of course we can, because we should understand them as sovereign countries and try to learn about what it is that they bring to the table or their histories as individual nations. But you cannot separate Venezuela from Russia. These countries now are inextricably linked, just like Iran and China are, even Turkey to a degree within that bloc, and India. So these countries are very powerful today. And Russia, you can't pursue good relations with Russia and warm, friendly relations with Russia while trying to stoke a Cold War with China or overthrow the government of Venezuela, because Russia will never trust you. They don't appreciate it. It's not like they see the sovereignty of Venezuela and China and other countries as totally separate from theirs. If the U.S. is working to undermine their allies, then we cannot be trusted as an ally from the Russian perspective. And, so it's very infantile, I think, for someone like Trump or his team to come in and think that they can pursue a path to peace with Moscow, but then treat these other they're going to be powerful countries. They're rich. They have rich histories, and we should deal with them based in reality, not in some past where we thought, oh, they would never develop after a certain point and we could just keep them under this boot forever. No, the world, this is the 21st century. We're we're a quarter of a way through it. It's not going to work like the way things did in the last 100 years.
Well, and one of the most striking images in the book to me, in keeping with that, is in America, obviously, a lot of our history in Latin America is hidden from the public. You describe a sculpture in the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry of Allende's shattered glasses from after his assassination. And as an American reading that, I just thought, wow, what a perspective they have on us in Latin America, that you would walk into the foreign ministry and see this monument to American coups in Latin America. Is that how Latin America sees us in general?
They see it as their own history. Yes, they see it as, this is what we are up against if we don't defend our sovereignty and yes, our own country and our own politics. And I'm speaking from the perspective of some of the Venezuelans I know may be imperfect. We may be able to improve, but the main fight right now that they have to focus on every day is just for survival. Because yes, that threat of violence and coup and terror that befell Chile in 1979 has been happening still throughout Latin America over the last 10 years, or 20 years. Honduras, Bolivia, these other countries that have fallen in similar ways. Ecuador, also lawfare becoming a major weapon. So the war has become sophisticated and hybrid. It's not the traditional military coup that we saw depose of Allende. But yes, this threat and this reality is very real to the Venezuelans, to the Venezuelan government officials who go to work in the foreign ministry every day. And that monument really demonstrates that this isn't a game to them. And there's no room really to stand back and to catch your breath, even, because the empire moves swiftly. And so I'm trying to bring that message to Americans so that we can start to reflect on ourselves and think about what we could do better, because I still do think we could do better. It's up to us to change. If we changed, I think the rest of the world would still want to interact with us, have a relationship with us. And that includes Venezuela. We would be sister countries, having great relations, best friends. We have such a common shared history that the only thing stopping an amazing existence between the U.S. and Venezuela are ideologues in Washington, D.C. It's not the crazy communists in Caracas. No, they're far more pragmatic than whatever you want to call, whatever ideology you want to give the people working in the Justice Department and Treasury Department here. So, and the State Department. So if we got rid of those people in Washington, I believe that things could be great.
Please clap.